Well, let's now bring you details of that report where the Court of Appeal has affirmed the election of Nasarawa State Governor Abdullahi Sule.
23rd November, which was fixed for the appeal court ruling on Nasarawa State's governorship election, has been long anticipated by the state residents as well as members of the ruling and major opposition party. Supporters of both parties take over the courts of appeal entrance to drum support for their candidates. The judge, Uchechukwu Oyemina, in his judgment says the tribunal was legally bound to act on witness statements filed along with a petition or front-loaded within 21 days as stipulated by law. He held that no petition can lawfully be amended outside the 21 days allowed by law as wrongly done by the tribunal. The court also dismissed issues of overvoting used to annul the election, adding that allegations in support of that were not established by law. Justice Oyemena held that the petition by the governorship candidate of the People's Democratic Party was a nullity and invalid on grounds that the jurisdictional issues raised by the governor was unlawfully ignored by the tribunal. The Court of Appeal reversed all orders made against the governor and the Independent National Electoral Commission while affirming Sule as the lawful elected governor of the state.
The judgment is expected because once something is put on nothing, you don't expect it to stand.
The case of the first and second respondent before the lower tribunal did not have anything to do with polling unit results. Did not have anything to do with the contest of election at the polling units. It was basically to do with computation of the results after it was duly concluded at the polling units. So it is strange for anybody to expect that you should bring polling unit agents to give evidence and demonstrate documents. Strange misconception of the case. And happily, this is not the final court in this matter.
The Nasarawa State government, in his reaction, called for unity and progress of the states.
Come together as a people to unite as one and develop our states. Our state needs all of us.
The Nasarawa State Election Petition Tribunal had earlier sacked the state governor, Abdullahi Sule, who was earlier declared the winner of the governorship election by the Independent National Electoral Commission. Helen Osamede Akins, TVC News, Abuja.
Public affairs analyst Duro joins us now. Mr. Duro, as it is, we're continuing to see development, fresh development following the general elections from Zamfara to Nasarawa, Kano, Taraba, Plateau, and of course the latest Gombe and Nasarawa, as it were. What do you make of how cases have been turning out at the Court of Appeal?
Okay, good evening to you, and then good evening, Nigerians. It's interesting in our democratic history what is going on today in the country as regards our judicial system. We have a situation where people are consistently and continually being disgruntled by the rulings of our Lord justices. And you ask yourself, the judiciary is supposed to be, one, the last hope of the common man, and then two, the bedrock of our democratic development, bringing constitutional order to processes where it is perceived that these processes are being flouted. But we see today where judgments of court is, in quotes, beginning to create some form of discontentment among the general populace. And I think the NJC, the CJN, and every other well-meaning justice judge of this country should begin to think Nigeria in their justice delivery. It is very important. We do not want to have a situation where people will lose confidence in our judicial system. Where people lose confidence in our judicial system, we don't want to have a country where everyone resorts to self-help. Nobody supports this, nobody wants this, but then our judges should be above board and be seen to be above board.
Mr.
A lot
Duro,
of judgments,
yes,
a lot
Mr.
of
Duro, you
judges
have
have been
emphasized
coming out.
that our judges should be above board, but the judges would also tell you that they would only adjudicate on matters, on evidences that are brought before them. So appellants are not supposed to assume that the judges would, by themselves, go get the evidences to decide on the cases before them. So do you think that the respondents, appellants, and all of them have actually done due diligence in presenting their cases at the law courts?
I am not an expert lawyer. I am a public affairs analyst and a close reporter of political developments in the country. And I believe my colleague who has just joined us is a lawyer and he will give us a legal dimension to this. But the first thing I want to say is we have seen the Supreme Court establishment about pre-election matters that should be kept as pre-election matters. This was not consistent with a ruling in Kano, where a pre-election matter was brought before the tribunal that the sitting governor was not, due process was not followed in his emergence as a governorship candidate or the gubernatorial candidate of the NNPC. We're seeing the appeal court upholding that, something the Supreme Court, which is a policy court of this country, has ruled on that you cannot, under any form or guise, institute any legal action against another political party that you were not part of their political process, which is stemmed or seen to be pre-election matters. So if on the one hand, there is a pre-election matter that is quashed by the courts, why are our courts also entertaining pre-election petitions and also giving rulings in favor of these pre-election petitions?
Well, Mr. Duro, let's get the legal aspect to all that. And Evans Ofeli joins us now. Mr. Ofeli, you have listened to some of the points made by Mr. Duro, and of course you're aware of what has been going on, especially coming from the Court of Appeal, the case in Kano, the case in Taraba, in Plateau, today Nasarawa with Governor Abdullahi Sule being returned. What is the legal implication of some of these judgments emanating from the court?
Well, the legal implication in the case under reference is that, particularly that of Kano, is that it borders on two issues. One, the issue of qualification. And let me raise this very carefully and quickly, that the issue of qualification is both a pre- and post-election issue. And because people have repeatedly said they are all pre-election, the issue of qualification is both pre and post, okay, when it comes to that particular area of qualification, okay? In the Kano case, we saw how that the tribunal, gave a judgment against the sitting governor, okay, and the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal went ahead and affirmed that decision. But then just yesterday, the CTCs that came out from the said process seems to be contradictory, is at variance with what was read in the open court. And by law, what is read in the open court is what the true position of the judgment is. Okay, so if the CTC was applied for, and in the CTC will not see paragraphical issues that are at variance with the substantive issue that was read before the open court, then there's a problem somewhere. The registrar said it's clerical errors. It is not uncommon to find clerical errors in judgments, but clerical errors should be typographical. There should be errors in the context of clerical outlook. It shouldn't be that you have material difference in the paragraphs, and then you have the verdict the other way around, different from what was read before the open court. all these issues packed together from Taraba to Plateau to Kano to where all cases heading to the Supreme Court ab initio. If these inconsistencies were not there, the cases were ab initio heading to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court is going to deal with all the issues from the issue of clerical errors to the issues of qualification, pre-qualification, pre-election, post-election, and every other issue, even the one in Zamfara, where the statement was made that INEC was wrong to have relied on the IRF, okay, so, if the judgment it passed that what is important is what is garnered in the back end of INEC and the rest of that. The Supreme Court will take all these issues, ask them accordingly, and put a final rest to them, and that will become the precedent that subsequently inferior courts will have to rely on those as precedent in the case under reference.
Yeah, and Mr. Ofeli, perhaps before it even gets to the Supreme Court, the registrar of the Court of Appeal in Kano has mentioned that this is a clerical error and it can actually be corrected if it is spotted by the court or any of the parties if they apply for it to be corrected. So perhaps that could actually happen even before it gets to the Supreme Court. But are you bothered in any way by the fact that after citizens go to the polls on election day, somehow the onus now lies on the court to decide who the actual winners of elections are?
The reason for this is because we have a messed up political system. And I've heard Nigerians continually, unwittingly, blaming the Supreme Court for, blaming the judiciary or the court for being the ones that are creating the problem. These same citizens collude with politicians, create political malpractices all over the place. Some sell their votes, some join hands. The politicians don't carry ballot boxes. People join hands. INEC also complicit. The citizens aggregate and decide to mess up the electoral system. Then because grievances count for something, the affected parties will head to the court. The court is on its own independence. So when they get there, the entire public will now say, all eyes on the judiciary. They now want the court to use pronouncement to clean the entire political mess. It cannot happen. Okay, if we are going to have a system where the people will be the determining factor, where the people will be the ones donating their allegiance to their respective candidates, then we must have a system that is devoid of malpractice. Okay, we just had the election concluded in Liberia, and we see how an incumbent was defeated and how the political system went through without violence. Here we have the semblance of violence, practices during our election system. And when we are done with all that, we now congregate and say, all eyes on the judiciary, waiting for the judiciary to do magic to clear the mess with court judgment.
And as it is, Mr. Ofeli, you mentioned earlier the fact that, there is a seller and there's a buyer. There has to be a seller for there to be a willing buyer. You would agree. But let's bring in Mr. Duro and let's talk about the position of the opposition in Nigeria. When the All Progressives Congress was in opposition, there was some level of vibrancy. You could get criticism on virtually any and every policy of government. Can you say the same of the parties in opposition today?
I can't. Okay. Right.
Yeah. Great. I think the opposition parties in Nigeria need to do more. Very well, the APC, whilst in opposition, we knew virtually everything the sitting government did then was absolutely wrong to them. And they don't just tell you it is wrong. When the sitting government says something once, they say it up to 10 times to the citizens that this is wrong. So this was how they were able to sell themselves to the citizens to buy into their agenda. The question is, are we better off pre-2015 or are we worse off? If we are better off, fine. But if we are worse off, then I think the opposition parties in the country need to probably go to media houses if they do not have, or search the internet if they do not have, of records of Alhaji Lai Mohammed and every other key speaker for the opposition pre-2015. Listen very well how they articulate their points, how they marshal out their ideas and everything, and speak vibrantly. What we see the opposition do in Nigeria today is literally complain about everything. Nobody is taking government into account. Nobody is making the sitting government of the day stand on its toes. Nobody is blowing out of proportion whatever it is that the government is doing. I'm not talking about selling maliciousness, but then letting the people know that, look, these people are doing this and we can do it much better. What everybody seems to be doing today is junketing from one place to the other, looking for where it will favor them the most. I give you one example. A particular political party came on board selling the narrative that they were going to change things around. Today, they are in the National Assembly. 160 million was budgeted to give cars to everybody. We didn't see members of the opposition come out on national TV to say, we are not collecting this. This is anti-people. This is this. This is that. So in that case, the average Nigerian will just say, nah, them. As soon as all they want to do is get into power, as soon as they get into power, then everything is the same for them. So we are actually between the rock and a hard place, whichever we want to choose. This shouldn't be the role of the opposition. The beauty of every vibrant democracy in the world today is a vibrant opposition. Go to the US, the GOP, the great old party, the Republicans, they are not making things easy for the Democrats and in person Joe Biden. You see them everywhere. You see them campaign. Even the prosecution of Donald Trump is being put out there to be a persecution, and they are saying out there that because they know that Donald Trump is a more preferred candidate in forthcoming election, and that is why they are persecuting him and all that. There is no time you open any of the American Times, you don't see this. This is like, what vibrant opposition.
All right, so it's looking like when people get into power, is it that they forget the promises they made to people? They forget all of their positions pre-getting into power. Perhaps we'll be able to talk about that some more. But let me bring in Mr. Ofeli. How do we strengthen our democracy, our electoral process, such that citizens get the dividends and the judiciary, which of course is the hope of the common man, the last hope of the common man, is not brought into, the political terrain, such that politicians can just take just about anything to them?
Yeah, we can actually strengthen our democratic engagement when the citizens decide not to collude with politicians to wreak havoc on the system. Okay, we have a system where people do no longer rely on merits. People want to cut corners and ensure that there's malpractice before they can win elections. People are not popular and they are out there at our faces and they want to win at all costs. Until we downplay that kind of politics and uphold a politics of merit, politics of popularity, where a manifesto will mean manifesto, where
uphold
repugnant to natural justice, equity, and good conscience. We need to develop a kind of political system that we tally with the philosophy of democratic engagement as we have it and as we copied it from the West. Our democracy have not clinched the kind of dimension and dynamics that it should have, and that is why we have bad governance. That is why we have inconsistencies all over the place. Until we develop the right kind of democracy, development will not be in place because we have not gotten it right, and we are not even making any attempt to get it right. INEC in particular need to have a mind of its own. INEC should not be swayed here and there and all that.
All right, and let's quickly get the final thoughts now from Mr. Duro. 24 years of unbroken democracy in Nigeria, but how do we further strengthen our democracy?
Okay, first off, let me make it clear that democratic rule still remains the best rule. At least it gives citizens the opportunity to express themselves. That's the first one. But for us to have successful democratic rule, we must have our wheels of justice must be seen to be wheels of justice, especially when it regards the political class. That's the first. Then the second one is INEC. INEC needs to be independent. INEC, as it is today, does not look independent. It
so
looks like a
independent from INEC, and Mr. Ufeli also has spoken about independence for the judiciary itself and for the citizens to hold those in power accountable. I must sincerely appreciate you both for joining us. Public Affairs Analyst Ebere Duro and Evans Ufeli, a legal practitioner. Thank you for your time on the program.
You're welcome.
Thank you.